Welcome back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk of WilksWorld.com, and I am so incredibly grateful that you are taking the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Friends, at the D-Rate the Hate podcast, it's all about bettering the world one attitude at a time. See, we did not create the hate, but with your help, we can derate the hate. That all starts with gratitude and personal accountability. We cannot control everything that happens to us in life, but we can control how we react to it. How we act, how we react, no matter what happens to us, how we react to it makes the difference. Friends, there is only one good thing about a bad attitude, and that is that we have the ability as individuals to change it. Here on the DTH podcast, we strive to bring you great guests and provide tools to do just that. Please be sure to share it with your friends. Subscribe if you haven't done so. Ratings and feedback are always greatly appreciated. And with that, let's get to this week's episode. Friends, I think it is easily lost on many who spend so much of their time trying to navigate the toxicity of this internet ecosystem. But there is a deep hunger out there for civic renewal, a deep hunger for civility in public discourse that many just don't get an opportunity to see today. You know, there are a lot of hardworking individuals out there that, you know, they're in this exhausted middle and they feel overlooked because they're caught in the crossfire of these partisan battles. Many yearn for this political landscape that prioritizes political solutions over ideological grandstanding. They just don't see it. That is why we all need to get involved in the depolarization movement. There is a way. There is a much better way. There are more of us out there that are tired of the constant bickering and divisiveness that seem to overshadow the real problems that we face in our communities. People often ask why I do what I do in this depolarization space, why people like me and this week's guest, Brian Allain, do what we do to try and battle polarization. Why we do what we do to try and heal the divides that this country faces. And it's because there is a hunger for healing that gives us hope. Friends, I could probably double the length of this episode by talking about all of the great things that Brian Allain has done, but I'm just going to mention a couple and then I'm going to get to this incredible conversation. Brian Allain founded Writing for Your Life, a resource center and conferences for spiritual writers, and the Publishing in Color conference series intended to increase the number of books published by spiritual writers of color. Brian also founded Compassionate Christianity and How to Heal Our Divides. How to Heal Our Divides, a practical guide, won a 2021 Independent Author Network Book of the Year award and was named one of the best spiritual books of 2021. How to Heal Our Divides Volume 2, An Abundance of Opportunities, is following in the same footsteps. It was named one of the best spiritual books of 2022. The second volume contains chapters from over 25 new contributors with a particular focus on additional organizations doing the important grassroots work to heal different types of divides. With that, my friends, you are not going to want to miss this incredible conversation. Here we go. Brian Allain, thank you for joining me on the D-Rate the Hate podcast, my friend. So good to see you as always. And this conversation will be the first one recorded for the podcast. So thank you for joining me, Brian.
Well, it's my pleasure, Wilk. We've had a chance to chat a few different times, and I really respect your work, and very glad that you're doing it. So it's, I think, a good partnership, for us to be able to have a conversation together like this.
It absolutely is. When I first saw your How to Heal Our Divides, the work you do with that your podcast and then the books that you've put out, Brian, I knew that it was going to be very closely aligned to what I do in the depolarization space, and then I found out that you're closely aligned as well with one of my favorite organizations, Braver Angels. So I knew we were friends before we had met, and then when we had an opportunity to speak, I was just definitely honored to call you a friend. So So yeah, this is a real treat having you on the Derate the Hate podcast for the first time, Brian. And I just want to really, introduce you to the DTH listeners as another incredible resource in this depolarization space, because I know you and I have talked about it before, but I think polarization is one of the biggest issues of our time, and something that takes precedent in my mind over so many of our other things, because as our common friend John Wood Jr. says, polarization is the one problem that ensures that all other problems won't be solved. So Brian,
That's a really good way to put it.
isn't it? Isn't it?
Yes,
When he said that on my
absolutely.
podcast, I was like, wow, that's a good one.
That's classic. That needs to become a meme.
Right? I think so. I think so. Actually, I'd probably get together with John and see if we can't come up with something like a good meme of
Yeah.
maybe him saying that or something like that. But so Brian, tell me how. I mean, okay. So just to step back for a minute for the DTH listeners. So you were this guy in big tech for a long time, and then you had a couple of organizations that you started, mostly in what was it, publishing and actually creating opportunity for people where you saw a real need in publishing and things. So talk about, first of all, talk about, writing for your life and publishing in color, and then how that kind of transitioned for you into this work that you now do in the depolarization space with How to Heal Our Divides.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, I mean, it's really honestly a crazy, miraculous story that I can't even still believe myself looking back on it. As you said, I spent most of my career in high tech. So I've got a master's degree in electrical engineering and an MBA. And so I did engineering related stuff, and then I did business related stuff, all in the high tech field for many years. And both startups and bigger companies, or startups within bigger companies, the whole nine yards. And then several years, ago, one of my classmates from business school said, "Hey, how would you like to come and work with me? I've got a couple small companies that I'd like you to help me run." And this was like a very creative guy who I really liked. And so I went to do that. And after I was there for a couple of years, he came into my office and he said, "I've got a project that I'd like you to work on. It's for my father-in-law, Frederick Buechner." And for people who are not familiar with Frederick Buechner, he just passed away about a year ago now, but he was a really highly regarded Christian author who appealed across the spectrum of Christianity. But he had never done any kind of self-promotion or, online development or anything. So he had no presence online whatsoever. So in December 2012, we launched his first website, social media. We built a seminary partnership program with 50 seminaries all over the world to donate copies of his books and sponsor an annual student award for excellence in writing. We came out with 3 new books, even though he wasn't writing anymore. So all this stuff to introduce him to a new generation of readers.
Okay.
And that was just an amazing experience. And after having done that, it was about the time I turned 60 and said, okay, what do I want to do the rest of my life? And that's when I started writing for your life, as you mentioned a minute ago, which, I said, okay, well, let me take what I learned in working with Mr. Buechner and help other Christian writers. So initially for Writing for Your Life, I did website development, I did marketing services, marketing plans, but then also conferences, so writers' conferences for spiritual writers. And an outgrowth of that, one of the things I kept hearing was that writers of color are really underrepresented in terms of number of books get published. So I said, well, geez, I'm not a publishing house executive, I'm not an agent, I'm not even an editor, but everywhere I've ever been on business, so much is dependent upon who you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I said, I do know how to do conferences. So I started this conference series called Publishing in Color that basically fosters relationships between writers of color and people from the publishing industry. So that started in 2018. The first conferences for Writing for Life were 2017. So those are the first 2 things I launched. The third thing I launched was called Compassionate Christianity. So if you go to compassionatechristianity.org, it's just all kinds of resources for compassionate Christians.
Okay.
And then the fourth thing is how you and I connected, which is How to Heal Our Divides. And the way that came about was that I was doing all kinds of reading during the pandemic, and in particular about many of these different divides, racial, religious, political, abilities, et cetera, et cetera. And there are all kinds of good books out there about analyzing the history of how we got here, or trying to convince you that it's an issue or what have you. But there was very little written about, okay, what do we do about it? And being, kind of an engineer at heart and a relatively practical guy, that was very frustrating.
Sure.
After I said to myself, okay, after the 2020 election, I want to do something about that. And at first I thought of just doing an interview series with people and organizations that were actually doing things. But then I said, well, geez, why don't I turn that into a book? Since I know how to self-publish books. So that effort started in mid-November of 2020. By Christmas, I was already oversubscribed with people that had said yes to contributing a chapter to it without me even paying them any money up front. And then because we self-published it, the first How to Heal Our Divides book was available for sale in May of 21. So basically, less than 6 months from just, an idea that nobody else knew about to a published book.
That's incredible, man.
And it had 33 different authors, each contributing their own chapter. And as I said, the focus of it was to try to highlight these organizations in these different kind of categories that were doing really good work. And of course, Braver Angels was one of those.
Right.
So,
good.
To make a long story short, and kind of finish the chronology. A year later, I did a second How to Heal Our Divides book, completely different set of organizations and authors, but the same kind of theme. More organizations that are doing really good work.
Yep.
And then I ended up selling 3 out of those 4 businesses at the beginning of this year. So Writing for Your Life, Compassionate Christianity, and Publishing in Color are now owned by other people, which allows me to go start something new, which is, of course, what's really in my blood. So I'm kind of in the process still of launching something called Find Your Next Calling.
Wow. Okay.
So if you go to findyournextcalling.com, you can see what that is. And it's meant to be kind of like what I just did myself. Figure out what is a great second career that you're called to, and then figure out how to launch it as a business.
Right. Well, and Brian, not everybody at the bright young age of 60 just decides, I'm just going to keep on jamming here. Most people are trying to round the corner. They're trying to wind down and everything. And you're just ramping things up, which is actually so inspirational. It's very cool that you're doing that. And then spending so much time, with this project, how to heal our divides. And, one of the things that came up at the recent Braver Angels convention that I was honored to be a part of was we need all these organizations. We can't build a movement without having many organizations coming together with a common goal to rise for America. Like you said, this project is not to attempt to gloss over our serious problems or make happy, but instead to highlight tangible efforts that are solving problems, actually working to heal divides in effective and practical ways. And I really like that, because me being somebody who's been in business, like you, not as long as you, but as business guys, right, one of the big things that we look at is root cause problem solving. How do we get to the root cause of something instead of just addressing the symptoms, and instead of just trying to figure out, what it is that's going on? Let's actually look at the root cause and tackle the root cause and really do something to affect change. And that's why, I really like what you're doing, Brian, with bringing these organizations together. That's why I love Braver Angels and their Braver Network now, is bringing these organizations together, because the best way that we can really tackle root causes to the problems that face us is to get together as many minds as possible, but not just get them together and have everybody talk past each other. It really begins with the conversation. It really begins with putting together minds of differing mindsets and different ways of thinking and having those curious conversations, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I mean, something that's this broad, the issues that we're talking about here, and pervasive, the polarization being so dramatic and so prevalent, that's not going to get solved by any one entity. It can't be. It's got to be a grassroots kind of a thing that, involves a lot of different people in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, it's one of these things where anybody that thinks that their side, I mean, it's just like a conversation I just had with my friend Zachary Elwood. When we start to take sides and it becomes an us versus them thing, that us versus them lens, when we're trying to look through that lens and that lens only, and we only see our respective tribes and only our tribe is right, we lose out on so much. We lose out on so much good. We build animosity, we build anger, our ears slam shut. We don't catch all the fantastic things that we don't have to agree on all these different things, but we should at least listen and listen with an open and curious mind, because no one tribe or party or organization like we've been talking about, not one of those is going to come up with all the right answers. It's going to be a collaborative effort.
Yeah, and I mean, how many people in life have you known that you agree with 100% on everything?
Right.
For me, I think it's zero. I mean,
I've never met one.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody could answer that question honestly and say, yeah, I agree with this person 100% of the time. I mean, even the people that I've loved the most, in fact, I would say that the people that I've loved the most in my life, I've probably disagreed with, more than others. But you know what? That's what makes our bond so strong. It's what makes the whole of what we do. I'll use my wife for an example, right? My wife and I I am so incredibly blessed to have my wife in my life, because not only do we it's not that we don't agree on everything, we don't disagree on everything, but we always have honest and open conversations about every single thing. And in doing so, we don't argue. We don't argue. We've never raised our voice to each other. We've probably been frustrated with each other, but in doing so, we have such an incredible bond, and we've been able to do incredible things together, and we complement each other's lives in the most incredible way. I think that is the kind of thing that we need. It's not because we agree on every single thing, but we are able to synergize. Instead of just compromising, we're able to look at each and every situation that we're presented with as a couple and synergize and work our way through those complications, not because we walk in lockstep with each other on everything, but we can come up with the best solution to whatever we face.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I know personally, I've had this feeling that our culture doesn't know how to grapple well with discussing difficult issues. And at least for the environment I grew up in was corporate America. Sure. And there were like three things that you couldn't talk about in corporate America. It was kind of the unwritten rule: politics, religion, and sex.
Right.
And so as a result, I feel like myself and lots of other people are terrible at talking about some of those kinds of things because we were taught not to.
Sure.
And even, within a corporate environment, it's kind of like there was always a boss, and the boss would decide, if there was a disagreement between A and B, right, or whatever.
Right. Sure. Yeah. No, I get you.
So it wasn't so much a peer-to-peer forcing function. You know what I mean? Of kind of what you described with your wife, where you have to work it out together if the organization is going to survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and and it's funny you bring that up, Brian, because one of the things I've been very, very fortunate to have some, not all, but some and good bosses over the course of my career. And I've worked my way up from being a very blue collar guy to now being in management, and fortunately, I'm very good at that. Not to brag, but I've had good teachers along the way, and I've made all my own mistakes. I've learned from my mistakes. It's been literally an OJT, on the job training, incredible career that I've had. Blessed to have it. Thank the good Lord for it. But one of my boss, well, actually, I've had a couple that have said it, and then other people that I've met through this podcast that have also said it, is, you know what? If we agree on every single thing, one of us is not necessary.
Yeah,
and by rights, one of the best bosses that I've had used to say it quite often, was, if you're just going to walk in lockstep with everything that I say, and not be able to think for yourself, then I probably don't need you here. I've got the wrong person here.
Yeah.
So
I totally agree.
And so when I look at people, Brian, whether it be in politics or especially like in our media today and stuff like that, and they all toe the same line. They are not able to think. I mean, they just focus like a laser beam and have complete blinders on to anything outside the narrative that they are given. I'm like, this is a waste of my time. Why do I need to spend my time with this person? Because they've just proven themselves completely unable to think outside the box. And then we just don't get anywhere with that kind of lockstep mentality. Mm-hmm. We have to be able to have those conversations. You talked about the 3 unwritten rules that in business, the politics, the religion, and the sex. Well, I think in a lot of ways that has reached, I don't know if critical mass or whatever is the right word, but so many people are afraid to confront people nowadays on things that are outside of their comfort zone. And with that being the case, or what it used to be, but now we've got this strange dynamic where so many people have taken their sexual identity and made it part of their core identity, or their political affiliation and made it part of their core identity. And since it was so taboo for so long to talk about those things, and now people have made it central to their core identity, and I'm really just thinking, I'm spitballing things, Brian, because I'm just thinking about this out loud as I'm saying it. I wonder if that really has something to do with the anger and animosity that gets built when all of a sudden it does come up, and now people have attached that to their core identity, and that contributes to that anger. I mean, I know it contributes to that anger and that animosity, but I wonder if the two are somehow related. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think when one of those identities is tribalism, and that gets adopted, then that's what causes, that phenomenon that you're describing, where it's an overriding aspect of a person's life and identity. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's one thing if the identity that you're talking about, that they're adopting isn't polarizing, right? Sure. Then that doesn't have the kind of impact that you're talking about. But if it's polarizing or tribal, then yeah, I mean, it just sucks up the oxygen.
Yeah.
Seems like what's going on.
Yeah, it can grind a room to a halt, can it?
Yeah.
I mean, we have seen that so much lately. No, so what? Talk to me about what you've been doing this for a while. You've made some incredible contacts in this depolarization space, Brian. What are some of the things you talked about? Root cause problem solving. What are some of the things that have really stood out to you as strong solutions to what we face as a country, what we face as a people? What are the best things that you've heard so far?
Well, I mean, one of the things that you and I were in a conversation earlier about the benefit to being in person, right? And we've all loved what Zoom has given us, particularly during the pandemic. But a lot of these issues of separation and divisiveness and polarization, require a little bit deeper exposure, relationship, uh,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
you know, awareness than what can typically be done through phone or through a video call.
Right. No,
And
absolutely.
so, whether it's Braver Angels or, many of the other organizations, that seems to be a very key component is um, the in-person relationship, that's fostered. And of course, because of the pandemic, we were without that for quite a period of time, right at the same time when, a great deal of the tribalism and political angst were peaking,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully peaking. So, I think there were kind of two phenomena that, happened at the same time that really made matters worse in terms of being able to improve things. I had this conversation at a festival that I just went to where we had a How to Heal All Divides panel, and we were talking about this. One of the questions I asked the panelists was, are things getting better or are things getting worse? And, the honest answer from everybody was, some of both, obviously. But my net, from what I see, is that things are indeed getting better. And the reasons I was pointing to were twofold. One was the scale and the growth and the impact of organizations like Braver Angels.
Right. Right.
Right. So 2 years ago, 3 years ago, Braver Angels was much smaller than it is today. Right.
Sure.
And obviously much greater impact now than what it had. So that was one. And then in the other direction, what I was trying to achieve with How to Heal Our Lives was raise awareness of
Yeah.
different organizations that were doing all these good things, because I was feeling like, on the nightly news, all we hear is bad news, right? On
If
the
it
media in
bleeds, it
general,
leads.
we don't hear much about all these great things that people are doing. So I feel as though there are even more organizations now doing great things than what there were, 2, 3 years ago.
Yeah. No, I
So
think you're
those
absolutely
two
right. I
things
mean,
give me hope.
and there's a lot of reason to have hope, and I hope people realize that, because yeah, I mean, you've got great organizations now, like Bridge USA is another great one. I got to spend a lot of time with the people from Bridge USA when I was at the Braver Angels convention. They're doing great work on campuses with with Gen Z folks, right? And Gen Z is one of the biggest demographics right now that are facing trouble because they've grown up in the age of the internet, and many of them by rights don't have the kind of social skills that or social awareness, the pre-internet social awareness that we've had. One of the things that you said, Brian, that really stood out to me was how Zoom has been a great thing for keeping us in touch with each other in certain ways, and I'm so incredibly grateful for Braver Angels for having me in Gettysburg, and we were able to get together nearly 700 delegates in person, politically divided but evenly divided, and having those good conversations. But you're right, with the age of the internet, this internet ecosystem, so many people became very comfortable saying things to people, people of opposing mindsets, saying things that they would never say in person, like these keyboard
Mm-hmm.
warriors that became very comfortable saying some very, very toxic things, that they just would not say. But when we can come together as a huge group, you talked about how Braver Angels was able to do this year what they weren't, what they would maybe couldn't have dreamed of doing 3 years ago. I
Sure.
think our literally in-person delegation in the year 2023 was almost triple what it was in 2019. So
Mm-hmm.
that's incredible. And just think if we can continue to scale that up, which we will continue to scale that up. I mean, now with the Braver Network and the different alliances that are being built in all these different states, But yeah, I think that important thing is really getting people together. But back to the organizations that are being built, like Bridge USA and Starts With Us, and then so many other incredible organizations that, I mean, just way too many to name, that have come together in like our Braver network now, that I know you and I are both a part of. I think about this hunger that people have now that gives me hope, because people have a hunger that they didn't necessarily have before, but they're sick and tired of the toxicity.
Mm-hmm.
So many
Mm-hmm.
people are, and we
Mm-hmm.
just, that hunger is what's gonna make this scale up, right? You and I talked about it before. It has to be grassroots. It has to start with each of us as individuals, and then we start to work at it together to well, as Braver Angels, the latest movement that we continue to talk about, Rise for America. We need to bring this thing back to, we need to bridge the divide, right? How to heal our divides. There's always going to be things that divide us, but we have to be able to at least have the conversation, and working through it, bridging that divide starts with the conversations.
Absolutely. You would ask me about, what are some other things that I've noticed, that are kind of elements of effectiveness in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them is to replace the quest for power with things like humility and empathy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because if our priority above all else is to be in control of whatever it is we're talking about, right?
Yeah, pick a top. Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Then, that's going to be the overriding driver of our actions, our attitudes, etc. Whereas adopting a mentality of humility and empathy, and I don't think that empathy is possible without humility.
That's
I mean,
right.
kind of realizing that no one of us know everything, right? I mean, no one of us has got a corner on intelligence or a corner on morality or a corner on right, versus wrong or whatever.
That's absolutely right.
And so, I think Braver Angels in particular has had a great focus on listening, which I think is one of the core elements that has to happen with this too. But I think listening with an intent of humility and empathy is really important.
I think you're absolutely right. It's far too often, and we see it. It sounds almost cliche, because I think it's been in several memes, but people often listen with the intent to respond, or react,
Right.
rather than listen to understand. You
Uh-huh.
know, and then far too often, and the thing is, we as human beings, Brian, are naturally geared to, once something is said that kind of offends our sensibilities, or really, and this kind of goes to what I was saying earlier, how we've attached some of our political beliefs to our core identity, or our sexual identity to our core identity, things like that. Once we hear something that offends us, often our ears just slam shut, and we no longer hear what the other party is saying. And I've experienced this so many times. Unfortunately, I used to say a lot of stuff that would probably offend people. I'm sure I still do, because there are a lot of people that are just easily offended. But I think you're right. I think we have to listen in a way, and really focus on humility, focus on empathy, try to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, really absorb what they are saying, not from our point of view, but what they are saying from their point of view, and try to understand it, in that way. Because to truly understand what somebody is going through, we can't always look at it from who we are. We have to try and look at it from who they are, which is, it's very difficult in many ways, right? But to do so really gives us the benefit of truly understanding what that person is trying to say, not with the intention to react, but with the intention to truly feel what they're feeling.
And I feel there's a couple of levels of this psychologically, right? One is the intellectual level, to kind of knowingly try to do the right thing. But then there's also this subconscious level. And so let me give you an example. It's like you and I are two white males talking to each other. And I know, coming from, a high-tech environment, it was mostly white males. And it was a very fast-paced, competitive kind of environment. So I got used to we all talk over each other.
Yeah. Lots of alphas in the room, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, you couldn't wait for somebody to finish making their point before you jumped in to make your own point.
Right.
And it wasn't done in a, what do I want to say, malevolent way. I mean, it was just like, that was the natural way we communicate.
It was just the way it worked. Yep.
And so, even when we were friends, even when we agreed on something, that's just the way we communicate.
Sure.
So for myself, it's been a significant learning experience to get myself out of that mode when I'm speaking with people who don't necessarily come from that background, or maybe a different gender or a different race or whatever, that they didn't grow up with the same norms. And, if anything, if I'm, the only white male in the room, I need to curtail my enthusiasm to make a point, or to be the lead, or to say whatever, because it just sucks up the oxygen unintentionally, I guess is what I'm saying.
Sure. Yeah, no, and I think that's a common mistake that we all make. It's a mistake that I still make to this day.
I do too.
In doing the podcast that I do, because I speak to a lot of people that on controversial topics, and both on and off the podcast. So let's just put it that way. And obviously, when I'm having those conversations, and doing this podcast, Brian, I have literally, and doing the work that I do with Braver Angels, it has taken me far beyond where I was 3 years ago, or 3.5 years ago, whatever it was when I started this. But working towards being better at doing exactly what you said, because I talk, obviously I talk on the podcast a lot about things like the perpetual victim mentality, and how different things with regard to race relations and things like that. But you're right. I make no bones about it. I'm just a Midwest redneck white guy, middle class white guy from the Midwest. So there's certain things that I can talk about, and there's certain things that in a lot of ways I just need to listen, and that's something that I continue to work on, and I think I continue to get better at it. But it does give me an opportunity to this podcast has given me such incredible opportunities to learn so much from so many, and that's why I love having these.
It really reinforces what we were talking about earlier, where at least myself, when I was younger, didn't get that kind of practice.
Right.
You're getting a whole lot of practice through all the conversations that you're doing on the podcast.
Sure.
Right. And I'm getting, similar kind of thing with a lot of the interactions that I do with the interviews and everything else. And my gosh, what a difference practice makes. What a concept.
It is. If I could give people advice about, one big piece of advice, people always ask, what advice would you give to your younger self? Practice listening.
Really?
Yeah. Practice listening. It's, in my opinion, practicing listening is far more important than practicing speaking. I like to do both, but yeah, practice listening would be the one thing. And when I say practice listening, I mean listen to really understand those with whom you are speaking, and not just to come back with whatever you want to say. Really try to absorb who they are, what they're coming to the table with, and truly understand it from their perspective. And then kind of bring your stuff to the table. So Brian, I'm sure we could continue this conversation for hours and hours. And that's why I love doing this. I love working in this space, this depolarization space. Again, it's one of the things that I think is the biggest thing that we face as a human race, biggest things that we face as a people, as a country. And getting to work with guys like you, Brian, is a true honor for me. I love having the conversations, and I look forward to more of them.
Same here. Thank you so much, Will, for all you do. I mean, it's important work. It's difficult work, and I really impressed at how you kept at it, given everything else in your stage of life. And, please continue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the Derate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week, saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.